I got into drugs at a very young age. I started doing bars, ecstasy, coke, shrooms. I was smoking weed all the time.
A sense of worthiness was not there
No,
at all.
I actually thought I would be dead by 23.
Wow, that's crazy. That's crazy.
What I would want to send to a younger audience or anybody who is my age who's still going through it, it's that you have to let go of that anger. You have to then also identify what are the cycles that you're being lost in. If that's a toxic home environment, if it's the way that, if it's the language that's being spoken to you, it's gonna be tough until you get out of that situation.
You know, there's a reason they say put that oxygen mask on yourself before you put it on an airplane, before you put it on somebody else, because you got to take care of yourself before you can take care of anyone else. But going back to the point though, is that if you are in a relationship with an entrepreneur, you have to understand what it's like. And it is not a routine clock in at 9, clock out at 5, spend time with your family or your significant other and have that quality. It is all time, all in consuming.
He didn't even meet my extended family.
Yo, what is up, everybody? This is the N2N Podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Yun Win. And as my audience and friends affectionately call me, the Ninja. This is the N2N Podcast, the Alpha to the Omega, the beginning to the end, talking about life, drive, motivation, entrepreneurship, success, and offering you morsels in this all-you-can-eat buffet called life. We are back in the studio, episode 66. So excited to be here. We have a very, very, very special guest on our show today. But before we want to get into that, I want to make sure to do what I always do in the morning and on these episodes, which is express gratitude. Start the day with gratitude, start the episodes with gratitude. Actually, I start everything I do with gratitude. And with that, I want to thank everybody out there in podcast land that has listened, liked, followed, and shared my podcasts. I do this on my dime, on my time, no sponsorships. So just to share the message and hopefully establish and reach our mission, which is inspire billions of lives across the planet in a very positive and inspirational way. So thank you out there for everyone who's liked, followed, commented, shared. As I like to say, we spread our message around the world based on a value exchange. And that value exchange is that if you learned something from this episode or any of the episodes, liked it, if you found something meaningful, changed your life, inspired you, just even a little bit, please do share the show. If your knowledge swole, share the show. That's how we grow. This special guest I brought on is very much a younger person, young adult, in her career, starting her career. But she is on this podcast because she was referred by a person on my legal team. They're good friends. But what brought her on is that in following her, she kept posting about how this podcast has changed her life. And so I wanted to bring her on to illustrate to a younger audience, to appeal to a younger audience, that you can apply these principles at any point in your life in order to potentially and hopefully change your life so that you can live a much more fulfilled life to your best controllable potential. So I want to welcome to the show a very special guest, Miss Katelyn Veverka. Welcome to the show. It's good to have you. Thank you so much for taking
me.
Thanks for taking time out of your day to be here. It's a great episode. Great to finally meet you in person. I know I've seen you on Instagram just posting about how you're just on this momentum roll, and shouting out the podcast and all that. So again, welcome to the show. So I know you have a unique heritage, and I want to kind of get into that and your upbringing before we get into how you found your journey to personal development and kind of manifesting or actualizing, like I like to say, actualizing a life and a future that you are looking to pursue. So kind of go into your background, like sort of, I know your dad was military, mixed ethnicities and that kind of upbringing.
Okay, yeah. So I'm Filipino and white, or the white side is Czechoslovakian. My dad, he grew up in Illinois. He was a farm town, small town boy. You could say he was uneducated because the highest level of education was high school. So he joined the military, And he made a career out of that. He served 22 years with the Navy. So while he was stationed in Pearl Harbor, he met my mom, who is a Filipino immigrant. So she comes from a family of 12.
Wow.
And the coolest thing is that she's actually the third set of twins. Yeah.
Jeez. So your grandparents on her side were pretty fired up, let's say.
They were, but there is also a saying that most impoverished families have a lot of kids to help with the labor that needs to help a family succeed.
I think that's a matter of reality, right? You know, more so than a saying. But yeah.
Yeah.
So where was she in the 12?
She was second to last.
Okay.
Yeah.
Born with a chip on her shoulder, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I actually had an aunt who, she was my mom's kindergarten teacher. She was the eldest of the 12.
Okay.
And she had a side gig, which was a singing career for the military. She was part of a band. So she would play. She raised enough money to one by one get all of my mom's siblings to the U.S. So they started out in Hawaii. Some went to California. Some went to Texas. Awesome. So me and my sister, we were born in Hawaii. My parents got married, I think, pretty quickly after meeting. And I'm the youngest of me and my sister. And after my dad retired, when I was 10, we moved to Dallas-Fort Worth to live closer to my mom's side.
Yeah, so it seems that it's a very humble life, very humble family.
Yeah.
Not a lot of means growing up.
Yeah, definitely not. I think, so in Hawaii, it was a pretty modest lifestyle. I was just always outside for the most part. My dad was always working. My mom was always working. And then we moved to Texas, where we did get a big house, but then the recession hit, and that's actually what moved us to an extremely small house in San Antonio.
Okay.
And
so you're talking about like 08.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we actually didn't end up moving until 2011.
Okay.
But my dad actually spent a year in San Antonio a year before we even moved there. So they had the house. He started living there in 2010.
So moving to Texas, Dallas, San Antonio. Where did you grow up in high school?
So
high school San Antonio then, right?
Yeah. So I started out high school. It was 4th grade through my freshman year in high school in a really, really small town called Kennedale. And the ironic thing is that, so in Hawaii, I fit in because I either look Hawaiian or I fit in with the highly Asian community there. And when I moved to Kennedale, a really small town near Fort Worth, I realized how differently I was treated because people actually thought like I was Hispanic. And so it was a culture shock for me because I wasn't blonde.
Yeah.
And like I would feel these things at 10 years old. So I started to realize these things. But it didn't, I didn't understand it completely.
Okay.
So after my sophomore year, we moved to San Antonio, and I continued to go down this bad path. It actually started in Kennedale, and I had an older sister, so there were some bad influences,
Yeah, of course.
And I wanted to just grow up, and like my parents weren't around; they weren't really involved in my academics. I wasn't encouraged to join any sports. When I wanted to join sports, I was pulled out because it was a monetary issue. Either we didn't have money for it, or my parents just couldn't take me there, or a constant thing that my mom would tell me that it's not ladylike for girls to play sports, or that you're going to get really big and muscular, and that's ugly.
So growing up, you had all these
I did have aspirations.
Yeah, you had okay.
I did, but they were like shut down by, I guess, my parents' disbelief.
So you had also these societal, I'm going to call them external influences that dampened your fire for life. So you felt that kind of.
Absolutely. And so I got into drugs at a very young age. I think I had my first full beer. It was actually a Four Loko. I was 11. And then the first time I was like throwing up drunk, I was 14. I started doing bars, ecstasy, coke, shrooms. I was smoking weed all the time. I smoked for many years. Following that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't actually until college I made the decision that I didn't want to smoke weed anymore.
So that's a lot to unpack. So let's unpack that a little bit. So you're feeling all of these external invalidations.
Yeah.
And so a sense of worthiness was not there.
No,
at all.
I actually thought I would be dead by 23.
Wow, that's crazy. That's crazy. Well, thankfully you're not.
Yeah.
Thankfully not. But this is a message out there to youth. Like, if there was something that you learned from that you could tell the audience, kind of that external, invalidation, people putting you down, your parents not letting you express all the things you want to do, either through money or even stereotype or whatever. You're not fitting in with the local culture because of your ethnicity, whatever. That's a lot to bear as a young person, young child.
I had a lot of anger.
Yeah.
And I think what I would want to send to a younger audience, or anybody who is my age who's still going through it, it's that you have to let go of that anger, and you can't be hateful for other people just because they are growing up differently. Like, I would resent peers around me because they had a really good relationship with their parents or even their siblings, or it just seemed like I always had like the bad end of the stick, right?
Yeah.
So on top of letting go of that anger, you have to then also identify what are the cycles that you're, being lost in. If that's a toxic home environment, if it's the way that, if it's the language that's being spoken to you, and it's gonna be tough until you get out of that situation. It wasn't until I left the house. I was 19 when I moved out, and I never went back, because I knew, just for my mental health, I did not have that negative talk anymore. I found myself as a different individual outside of that home. So if you're younger than 18 and you can't move out, it's going to come down to believing in yourself. And that's the one thing that I struggled with. That's why I was so lost in the sauce in drugs.
Yeah.
Because I didn't believe in myself. I obviously thought I would be dead by 23 because I didn't even foresee the future for myself.
You could see no pathway out of this.
I did not. Yeah.
Wow, that's great. So there's one thing I stress a lot is it sounds like you have the ability to control what you can control.
Yeah.
Which is your actions, your thoughts, how you respond.
Mm-hmm.
So your
activities that you do, who you choose as your friends.
Yeah.
So.
And your environment. So you actively, was it a conscious thought to remove yourself from that environment, or? So how do you into how you got away from drugs and all these other?
When I actually think about how the cookie crumbled, I honestly want to say it has to do with luck. I think I really have to be thankful for literally how the cookie crumbled, because my dad lost his job in Kennedale. He took a job at the Air Force Base in San Antonio, and so we moved to a high school that had a lot more opportunities. Like, they actually offered more than just a Spanish course. You could take like a Greek course, and they had swimming teams, and it was a bigger high school that obviously had more funding and a lot more people. So the one thing that I always knew I was good at was school, because I knew as long as I just did really good academically, then I was just pleasing my parents. I wasn't necessarily doing it for myself, but I also wasn't doing anything that I was necessarily interested in either, right?
Okay.
But
so that's a dramatic dichotomy, though, because you shared earlier off pre-show is that you're in academic honors classes in high school, but yet you're also also swallowed into this drugs and
right. I was doing drugs and I was an A and B student because that was the only thing that I had to be proud of for myself.
Okay.
And I knew it just made my mom happy because she's also uneducated.
But you're looking for the external validation.
Right. So I'm like, look, I've been making A's and B's, so tell me you're proud of me.
Yeah.
You know, like
Okay.
that kind of thing. Yeah. So I think when we moved to San Antonio, then I was like, okay, cool. Now I get to be in all these classes. And I am always going to be thankful for all the teachers who believed in me. And I think because I didn't really have that validation at home or, you know, like for myself, it was a lot of my teachers that would tell me, Katelyn, I know what kind of stuff you're getting into. You can do better. Or they would pull me aside and they would have these conversations with me. Or they would tell me, hey, I really have this opportunity. I think if you focused hard enough, you could do that. And I remember having like an internship interview with the NSA, the National Security of America.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't know if this was a tactic or a ploy like that my teacher had put me under, but it was an interesting interview that we had at the school. And she said, like, we are going to drug test you, but it's not going to be a urine test. It's going to be a hair test. And I started crying. And my teacher consoled me. And I just remember feeling that disappointment from my teacher. And I was like, I can never do this. I can't do this again. I mean, mind you, I did still continue smoking after that. But it was those lessons that I learned through those teachers. And then in high school, I actually had an AP English teacher. She had all the students take a grit test. And she had us line up in a line and from the most grit to the least grit. And I ended up being dead last in that line. And that was really embarrassing for me. Because for one, I was like, what the hell is grit?
Right.
I've never heard of this before.
Unless you're in competitive sports or anything like that, you have no idea what grit is.
I was never in sports or anything like that. I did like theater. So I was a theater geek for a while.
But you can't really learn grit in theater. Nothing against actors or people, the thespians out there. But and that was thespians with a TH. Thespians.
Yes.
But I don't know that unless you're just constantly reciting your lines over and over to build grit. I don't know how you build grit. But it's a concept that not a lot of high school or teenagers understand or know unless you're in competitive sports.
Yeah. So that really hurt my ego. So for the most part, my ego was just shot all the time. Never believed in myself. Again, didn't really have aspirations. But the one thing that I did focus on was, okay, cool, I have good grades. And I remember, I think I was approaching, it was 2 weeks until like college applications, it was the deadline. And I remember, I mean, when I look back at it, I don't even remember hearing about, like, I wasn't paying attention to it. Flatline.
What's
like,
college? Essays, reference letters. You know, I have no idea
did not. I think I was always under the impression that, like, okay, cool, like I would be guided into the process, but no one was guiding me. I obviously did not have a mentor.
Yeah. And your parents, not having been educated formally,
did not understand the process either. And even though I had an older sister, she didn't go to college. She just entered the workforce, but she had a boyfriend at the time. She moved out. So I really I felt so alone in this city. And, you know, moving to a bigger high school in the middle of high school, and not playing sports, so you can imagine how many friends I had. So, which is quickly why I was like, well, my friends are my drug dealers.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But
PSA, don't use drugs, kids. Yeah.
It was you know, quite the lonely time. And then,
so when did it all turn around? Like, when did you just say, most of the time someone has to hit rock bottom, you know, they're destitute out on the streets, something like that, before they get the wake up call. Like, speaking of wake up call, shout out to Anthony O'Dunsey with a wake up call on Amazon. It's a prior guest. When did you get your wake up call?
Well, I think there was a lot of different little wake up calls. Like, for me, so I wasn't thinking about college, but I was working at a call center, and I had a dear friend. Her name was Reem, and if it wasn't for her, I would not have been in college, and I definitely wouldn't have gone on to get my master's degree. But she just asked me, have you applied to college? Like, have you scheduled your classes? And I said, no. And she just knew I was lost, a lost puppy. Yeah. And she pulled my manager aside and she was like, hey, like, this is really serious for her. She needs to get this done. She got permission for us to do the admissions and schedule my classes, and she helped me get into like the community college. And then from there in community college, I again just trying to push myself into things that I knew I was capable of doing. I signed up for some pretty hard classes anyways.
Yeah.
But I made friends, and it was that moment where I told myself, I'm going to surround myself with people who either motivate me or I just want to be like. If they're better than me academically, I need to learn. Because I think even though I was pretty successful at school, I didn't really have to study. I just kind of made good grades naturally. But then there's all these people with like highlighters, and actually they're able to recall information a lot better, especially in like chemistry classes. You can't, sometimes some things aren't always memorization. Anyhow, and so then I transferred to university, and I wasn't even planning on doing my master's either, but because I think my department just knew that I had some type of aspirations. We had like a little interview sheet for all the graduating seniors, and because I mentioned something about potentially doing my master's or what kind of field I wanted to get into, they gave me an automatic acceptance into the grad program. So I did that, and I hated it.
Before we get to why you hated it, I want to back up a little bit, because there's two things in your story that stand out. And this applies both to the young audience and also people still trying to find their way, is that you had the wherewithal, at least, to remove yourself from bad environments. But then you also said that you came to the realization of surrounding yourself with high value or higher value people than you value yourself, which is a very mature perspective, because of two things. One is you are a product of your environment. Unless you actively, if you stay in a bad environment, you'll probably end up in bad situations. If you remove yourself from that and put yourself into better environments, it just kind of naturally, and we'll get into that later in your career story. But the idea of surrounding yourself with higher value people, there's an episode, I forget which one, where you become in essence, a combination of the 5 or 6 people you spend the most time with, right? Your inner circle, so to speak. You pick up nuances from everybody and you become that. And so how did you have the introspection or the self-awareness to actively find a better environment or a better group of friends or people you hung out with? Like, some people just kind of randomly go through life, and whoever's in their life, they just cling on to that group. But you're saying when your friend Reem, you're like, now I'm actively seeking a better circle. Like, how did that?
So my sister, she worked at the call center, so I just ironically got the job there because of her. And Reem just happened to be my coworker. And for the most part, because it was an entry-level call center, there was a lot of college students. And for them, it was their first-time job. I had already had jobs. I worked at Sonic, Zoomies. I worked at the mall. It was all retail jobs. I was working since I was 16, to make money, to get out of the house.
Right.
I think the only thing that I really harped on was that the only thing I knew I was capable of was making good grades. So I knew, well, I can make good grades, and I just need to surround myself with people who also make really good grades, so maybe I can get better grades. And I wanted to please my mom. I think my mom's only goal, like coming to the U.S. was for her children to have a better life. If she couldn't have, a phenomenal life, if she didn't have those aspirations, then she would want me and my sister to have a really good life. And so there's this one thing that I always say. It's like, I did my bachelor's for my mom, but my master's, I did that shit for myself.
Yeah.
So yeah, once my bachelor's was over, I was like, okay, cool. And then ironically, I got into my master's. So yeah.
Okay. And two things out of that. Yeah, a lot of pearls I like to peel apart for our audience so that they can relate to your story, which is everybody has a gift. And it sounds like through your story, your gift was academics, like the ability to navigate academics. And you hung on to that even in your lowest times of drug use. I don't want to say abuse. I don't know. But
yeah, it's abuse.
But you hung on to the academic side as an anchor to lift you out of a negative situation. So to those of you out there, everybody has a gift. You just got to find what it is. And if you're in a down spot, lean on to that gift, because it can lift you out of where you think you are. Some people have more than one gift. Some people have a variety of gifts, but everybody has at least something they feel or they know that they're really good at. And if you do, then use that as your springboard to the next level. The second part is you had I don't want to say a mission, but a why, kind of a bigger why than yourself to help motivate or push you through, which is appeasing your mom. For positive or negative, that was a why.
Yeah.
Why are you driving? So for you out there, there's a whole self-development, self-improvement area of finding your why. Because when you make it bigger than yourself, it's easier to get through the tough times.
Yep.
When things aren't working out, you go back to your why. Kind of like my son playing basketball. I keep asking him, why are you pushing yourself so hard to become a hooper? And you have to find that why. And, he's found it. It could be, the first person in our family to ever play college level basketball ever in our whole family line. Or it could be an example to his younger sister or anything like that. When it's a bigger reason than yourself, it makes those 5 a.m. workouts a lot easier.
Yeah.
Gives you motivation to do that. So kudos to you for having identified those things so young. So now you're like, the hell with bachelor's. I'm getting my ass kicked in my master's, but I'm getting it. Right?
I hated it so much.
Yeah, okay. So
I think so my passion, my master's and my bachelor's are environmental science and ecology, and my focus was policy and administration with natural resources.
Okay, slow down. So for our audience that aren't in that field of work, what does that degree mean in kind of everyday terms?
The way that I would describe environmental science, it can be the jack of all trades depending on the school that you go to.
Okay.
Mind you, when I got into college, I did not understand how it worked.
Okay.
I did not look at any other colleges. I just knew, okay, UTSA is close by.
University of Texas, San Antonio.
Yes.
Okay.
And if I want to see my family dogs again, I just have to drive down the street.
Right.
Because I moved out when I was 19.
Right.
So that was my thinking. I didn't have any other plans.
Okay.
Right? Yeah.
Sometimes things work out.
Yeah. Environmental science, it can tap into, again, depending on the college you have, they might have more precise avenues to go down, but you can have ecology, you can go into
sanitation,
biology,
I don't know.
Maybe not. Yeah, not sanitation. So then you can go into the engineering side of things, environmental engineering, but that would be probably in the engineering school. You can go into sustainability, but at UTSA that was separated into the urban planning and sustainability and architecture, I think. So sustainability is part of that. There's human health aspect. So if you wanted to maybe go into the medical field, it might still be under the biosciences, but I'm sure UTSA is still figuring out how that department was really going into. I think the curriculum at the time that I went in the class, I'm trying to think of all the classes that I had. So there was chemistry. A lot of chemistry was involved, but for the most part, it's going to be like soil science. You're going to have your aquatic sciences, just understanding really your environment. It's environmental science. Okay. There's atmospheric science. So we also got to learn some really useful tools that helped me, I feel like, get to where I'm at, which was GIS. It's Geographic Information Systems. It's like some hardcore Google Maps, pretty much. You can make data visualizations. And then statistics. But we did environmental statistics. So there was a lot of case studies with like air pollution. So a lot of my projects would have to do with adverse health effects for lower income communities, what kind of statistical analysis could we form based off of like this raw data. So, and we would use coding programs to do that. So I took those skills and I slapped them all over my resume, like jumping into the career field, because I knew these were golden words.
Yeah.
These were the words that people are going to be attracted to, even though I wasn't confident in these skills. One thing I was good at was sounding professional.
So we'll move right into that. So, but you had no idea the career specific path you were going.
No, I just knew that I was really passionate about the environment. Because, I come from Hawaii. Like, I had my feet in the soil. I'm so into bugs, guys. Like, I love snails. I love ladybugs. Like, and really, Hawaiians, they're very in tune with their nature. And they respect it. Yeah. Here in Texas, we are very much involved in the built environment, and I was actually really, really hateful of that. Now I see a lot of the benefits, and I see a happy medium.
So you're bringing a naturalist perspective to a very technical field.
Now I am.
Yes. Okay.
So now, that's where these podcasts and all this motivation is kind of coming into. I'm taking my passion, and then I'm seeing what, I guess, the bigger picture, what kind of big questions can I solve for the world with business as usual, as it is right now.
So before we get into that, which is kind of the main crux of this episode, so you're applying into the real world job pool, and you end up where?
So out of my graduate program, I applied to TCEQ, which is Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. It's a state government agency. Because coming from a military background, my dad was in the military, so I knew at least that government jobs would take care of you. They had really good benefits. For me having to pull out student loans, I was like, well, they will take care of the student loans. Yeah. After 10 years of working for them. But
fine print stuff. Yeah.
I was like, perfect, I have a governmental job. And then also with a governmental job, it's a good name to have on your resume so that you can progress. So I just kind of knew, okay, let me get into this job. My first position, again, utilizing the skills that I took from my master's and bachelor's, I focused my resume on a lot of the softwares, which was GIS, and it was the statistical programs. So I ended up getting a job as an air quality modeler. And although I didn't have to write much of the code, they were already written, I was still coding, changing variables, pulling and extrapolating like raw data, manipulating this data to create data visualizations or air pollution maps that would then be sent to the EPA.
Got it. Very cool.
So yeah, it was a job that I was actually extremely proud of.
Did you have any mentor or anything at this time, or you're still figuring these things out on your own?
I was still figuring this out on my own. Again, my teachers were, I had some professors in my grad program. I just knew, like, some of them, they were just so into their academics, and they were like, if you're not doing, and the thing is, I did non-thesis. I intentionally went in there wanting to do a thesis, but when I realized that, like, usually people who do thesis or even like a PhD program,
there's theory versus real world.
Right. And I was really eager to get into the working world. And I had to sit down with myself, and I'm like, do I want to continue to do research? Do I want to continue to have to ask for proposals or budgets? And that's not really something that I really wanted to do. So, and then I also looked at the resources that were available for my program. So I just made that decision where, one, I could chase that at a different university. Do I really want to be in the academic system for many more years? Yeah. So, and then I said no. So I went non-thesis, and I fast-tracked my master's in 1 year.
That's fantastic.
Which was terrible and hard.
But you got through it. So so it's doing difficult things when you don't want to do them. Yeah. Right, to get you where you want to go, because you knew where you wanted to go. Yeah. But then you're like, damn, I got to walk through all this to get there.
Yeah. Right. I didn't even walk the stage. I was so fed up.
Yeah, you're out. So now you go into this public job role. Yeah. But you still have these lingering, I don't have grit, I don't have all these things. Yeah. And then you end up in Houston, like that transition.
So for myself, I was personally thinking, okay, with these skills, maybe I can get into the EPA. The reason why I chose this position and also my career in high school, I took an AP environmental science course. And I was like, I love everything that the Environmental Protection Agency stands for. Plus, it's government. So
Yeah.
I actually, well, let me backtrack. At the time, during my bachelor's and my master's degree, I was dating my boyfriend at the time of 4 years, and he was an entrepreneur. So he was
What kind of entrepreneur?
He does social media marketing. Right now he does a lot of like scaling small businesses, small online businesses with like Google ads, Facebook ads, and things like that. But he started out just as a photographer. He actually, we met in college. He had, I think, like a business. He was going toward his business degree in marketing, and then he just started his own business. And he's done like so many small projects, from photography to like product photography. And then that's kind of when he realized he actually likes doing like the back end, building websites, building brands, and then advertising.
Entrepreneurs are builders.
Yeah.
Right,
And so
naturally.
he's really successful at it. And I saw this ambition. And so that was really motivating for me. But again, it didn't help me believe in myself. What I instead did was I wanted to help him succeed. So when he was helping all these brands, there was a big opportunity here in Houston where his mentor was here in Houston. And so we just collectively agreed that it would be best for him to move here. So I moved with him. Yeah. And I had quite the culture shock when I got here to Houston, because we moved to a really nice area called River Oaks.
Okay, and one of the top zip codes in the country.
Yeah, it's very wealthy.
In terms of wealth.
Yeah.
So hold on right there. So this is your first exposure to the entrepreneurship world, right? Through your ex-boyfriend. Shock in that area, or kind of what did you see? Like what did you learn as a bystander or a supporter of an entrepreneur or the entrepreneurship route?
Honestly, at the time I didn't understand it, because when he started his company, he did not tell me that's what he was working on. So I thought he was just gaming all the time. So it was really annoying for me, actually. At first, I thought he was just ignoring me. Even though we lived together, he was just spending time on his computer constantly. So for the most part, I felt like neglected. But again, I was so busy with school anyways. So I was just, focused on, I need to finish my grad program. But he was always really ambitious. So I honestly don't think I really appreciated having been exposed to that until after the fact. Because I did end up leaving this individual based off of my own, personal wants and needs from a relationship perspective. So when I left, I realized, well, I still like the lifestyle that I've been presented. So what the hell am I going to do to maintain it? Because I felt like for the last some odd years, I made these huge sacrifices for him to succeed. And I didn't know anything other than, like just working for the government. And at the time, I didn't even apply for the EPA. I was still working because I was so focused on obtaining those skills. Yeah. Because again, it's a very technical role. Yeah. And so you want to be a professional in that.
So let's back up just a little bit. So there's several episodes I've had where it's like relationships and values and understanding what it's like to be with an entrepreneur. So you're saying, for whatever reason, your ex-boyfriend was so driven that you felt neglected. Yeah. Which is, to the audience, it's a very common thing.
It is.
Because you didn't have a relative perspective to appreciate what it's like to be an entrepreneur or work for yourself or try to build a business. It is an all-in thing, would you say?
Oh, yeah. It's all in.
It's all in.
And he is a great human, and he deserves all and every great thing that happens to him. I think for me, I just realized I don't think I could be the appropriate support system for him anymore. I needed to support
build
myself.
yourself. Yeah. So that's another important point, which is, there's a reason they say put that oxygen mask on yourself before you put it on an airplane, before you put it on somebody else. Yeah. Because you got to take care of yourself before you can take care of anyone else. But going back to the point, though, is that if you are in a relationship with an entrepreneur, you have to understand what it's like. And it is not a routine clock in at 9, clock out at 5, spend time with your family or your significant other and have that quality. It is all time, all in consuming. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
He didn't even meet my extended family. And again, coming from my mom's side of family of 12 11
aunts,
we see
uncles.
each other often.
Yeah.
So
but it clicked. So presumably you're in the highest top, I want to say, if not the top 5 zip codes in terms of wealth in the country. You have an amicable split, and now you're out on the outside looking in, having experienced that life a little bit. Is that what triggered what did that trigger?
That is what did it for me, because it's absolutely terrifying being on your own. But it's also exhilarating. So I purposely knew if I'm going to move out of River Oaks, I'm North Montrose. I'm still kind of there.
Yeah. Okay. Close.
I knew that
it's a few miles away.
Yeah.
If you don't know Houston.
8 minutes down the road.
Yeah.
So I just knew, one, I'm not done with Houston. So I think as I was actually leaving that relationship, we had to write out our lease together. And we're fine. We're cordial. Or at least I like to believe so. I had another friend. I was friends with everyone in the building because I was so lonely in that relationship. I made I made a ton of friends in there, and I got to realize how many cool jobs people have that I didn't even know existed. I met this lady who was a playground architect. I'm like, what the hell is that? That is so cool.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, there's things that are out there that I need to discover. And so I knew that I needed to be around these people. I need to keep people like this around me. And I was afraid that if I moved to on like the outskirts or like somewhere out here, Katy, then I would be in the burbs. Yeah. So I'm not trying to be in the burbs. Yeah. I'm trying to be around people that my eyes gravitate toward, and like why. So interesting people. Like, again, it sounds really superficial to say, but like the flashiness. I wanted to continuously see the flashiness so I could see what is out there, because it got me curious to know what is it that this person's doing that is making them this money. Like, again, I've never seen anything like this before. Like driving down Kirby Drive, I'm like, what in the world? Yeah. And like, I just want to knock on these people's doors.
Somebody owns these $1 billion buildings.
And I wanted to just knock on these doors and be like, hi.
Yeah.
You know, like, what do you do?
So it brings up a very good point, is that you are limited to what you believe can exist. And if you aren't exposed to certain environments, you just don't know that it's there, or it's unfathomable that it could happen. So I'm very impressed with the self-awareness to understand that, I heard this great expression the other day. It's like, if you're an entrepreneur and you ever feel down in the dumps, go to the most expensive hotel in your area. Yeah. Go to the lobby and just order a cup of coffee or drink. And you just watch all this wealth and success just moving about the hotel. Yeah. And you're just going to feed off that energy and just leave and go on to your business. But it's putting yourself in those environments to really actualize that it's possible. So if you're out there listening through Katelyn's example, put yourself in environments where, even if you're in, nothing against Katy because I'm out there, even if you're in Katy or in the burbs and you feel down in a rut, things aren't working for you, go into the city and sit into a hotel lobby where it's like ultra wealthy. watch them valet the Rolls Royce, the Bentleys, the Ferraris and Lambos, and understand that somebody owns these things.
But also,
and they're no different than you.
Be friends with them.
And become
Say
friends
hi.
with them.
Like,
Yes.
What I learned being so alone in that apartment in River Oaks, I said hi to every face.
Yeah.
And I was always so closed off. If someone looked at me, I would just be like, you know how people make that weird face, like,
yeah, that
one. And then I just told myself I need to stop doing that. I need to be more friendly. And I became friends with all these people. I would have chats with them. I met someone in that building who he was a professor at Stanford, and he's worked at really big companies like Twitter, Google, Apple, and Facebook. And he's had bidding wars against them based off of his expertise. And I'd say, he's like a really cool friend of mine, where he was like, I'll give you access to like the stats course if you want to relearn and then also get back into tech.
Yeah.
And so it's like you're making friends who are giving you amazing opportunities that I would not be able to afford on my own.
Which you bring a great point, because sometimes it's not what the person you're relating with knows or has. It might be who they know.
Yeah.
These 6 degrees of separation and things that you never know. So,
but it's also, I think, people really want to help. Like if you just show or describe what you're going through, but you want something different, and they can sense that, they're always going to relate to that.
Gosh, that's gold. We'll have more conversation, but that's probably the most golden nugget, is that you will be surprised, and I've said this in prior podcasts, how successful people want to help other people who show that they want to be successful too.
Yeah.
Because they know what it takes.
Yeah.
And it takes so much that now that they've crossed over to the other side, they want to help people, but they don't help random people. You have to show
it
that you want to get to that next level, and people are like, sure, I'll help you out, which is a phenomenal point to make.
And that's something I'm recently learning through these podcasts and everything that I'm trying to stay motivated, is because I wanted to stay humble for the most part. I've had partners in my current company just say like, oh, you always sell yourself short, Katelyn. I don't know why you do that. I understand because you're so new in your career, but also you only really boast yourself around your peers, boast yourself around everybody, because it's the people who are at a higher status who are going to be able to open those doors for you. Absolutely
correct. My son's experiencing this through his basketball recruitment. I think the definition of humbleness is knowing you're a badass, right? And you can do all these things, but not flaunting it.
Yeah.
But when it's time to show that you can be a badass,
right,
you got to show that you can be a badass.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So you're not flaunting it. It's just a level of confidence and expressing it.
Yeah.
So that people know.
It might have been the confidence, because I was having a conversation with a friend where we right now with this job thing that we might get into. It's I was like, I'm struggling trying to say like, okay, well, you can give me whatever you want and I'll do whatever you need me to do. I just thought that was so weird and quirky to say, because I would rather come to the table and say, I have this experience and this is why like you'll benefit from that. But at the same time, I'm realizing if you just ask for things and say, I'm willing to do whatever you want me to do, sometimes that really does actually rub people the right way.
Yeah.
But I was under the impression that I shouldn't be saying that, when really I needed that confidence. So I could, if I'm saying that, so I could actually do it. And I think that's why I wouldn't say it, because I wasn't confident in myself. So confidence factor.
So moving into that. So now all of a sudden you're 8 miles away from River Oaks, and you want to get you have to do something to get back. Get back into that scene that you're desiring for yourself, and it could be a different motivation for everyone. It's individual. So, is this where you find that kind of development path.
Yes.
Okay.
So before I had moved into the apartment that I moved into, I had a friend tell me, like, okay, well, if this is where you're at with your job, just why don't you look for another one? Like, if finances is your only goal right now, look for another job. And again, my confidence was like, well, I don't really have the technical skills. Like most people I'm competing with, they are 10 years, like they're 20 years experience with these technical skills. And I've only been doing it for a year. And they're like, but if you believe in yourself, just do it. And so I was like, you know what, fine. Within 3 weeks, I had a ton of interviews. And I ended up getting a job offer from the EPA. And then I ended up getting a job offer from the company that I currently work for. I had actually started with the company that I currently work for, which is a private industry in oil and gas. And so right now I'm an engineering consultant. And I'm not an engineer by trade.
Yeah. Yeah. Good for you.
So it's air quality engineering, which oil and gas is the one sector that I completely ignored during my environmental science studies because I never thought I would go into it.
Energy credits and all that. Yeah.
And so when the EPA came around about a week and a half later, they wanted me to move to a different state. And I knew there was all the benefits there. And I was talking to my family members, and all of my family members were encouraging me to go with the EPA. But I just had this gut-wrenching feeling where I was not done with Houston. I was not done with everything I was being exposed to. I was like, this is just such an interesting culture shock to me. I feel really happy with the connections that I'm making. I'm not done here. And I feel like there's a reason why all these people have all these cool jobs and like they work with private industries, and maybe I just need to stay with private industries. I really like what this company stands for with the private industry. So I was like, maybe if I just learn the skills here, then I can go to the EPA later. Regardless, I declined the EPA, and I just saw more opportunities with the private industry. So I wanted to stay. So then I moved to my apartment. And then again, I recently just renewed my lease. But I was coming at a crossroads where I was like, where am I going to go after this? Am I going to just continuously be chasing, this new brand apartment has these deals, and like, so in order to stay in like a really nice luxury apartment, like I'm always just chasing these deals, but there's all these miscellaneous like charges and things like that. So I started to think about all of that. And I think what motivated me was like, I want to be able to just be so comfortable with where I'm at that like I don't have these stresses.
Okay.
So at the time, oil and gas is such
Money's
a learning
not the only
curve.
thing, but it helps.
It does help.
Yep.
Yeah. And I was having a really tough time settling into like oil and gas. And I was learning this, and I think I had approached my 1 year with work. And I honestly really don't know what it was that made me start to listen to the podcast. I think it was just, I got to a point where my lease was ending and I got scared. Either I had a dream, or I just remember having this thought that like I could lose this all. And what if I end up on the streets? What if something happens to my car and then in the same week, like I lose my job? And I really started to scare myself.
Panic attack.
Yeah, into like thinking all these things. And I was like, how am I gonna, like, some people, if that happened, they would be fine. I would not be fine.
Yeah.
So I just started to think like, I need to start doing things that I'm absolutely interested in because I'm losing focus in work. And, maybe I don't really see myself like I could obtain these skills, but long term, say like 5 years down the road, 8 years down the road, 10 years down the road, is this the particular skill that I want to be an expert in? So again, I fell back onto the people around me. I started asking them certain questions, or how did they do it, or what was their path like? And so then that's when I actually started listening to my friend's podcast, And then I referred that podcast to Myra. And then Myra was like, if you like this stuff, you will like this podcast.
Which is this podcast.
Yes.
The N2N
And
podcast,
she would send me the motivational text messages and like quotes and stuff that you would send. I was like, this is right up my alley. And so she sent me the podcast. And I think when I got back to her, I was like, I'm already on episode blah, blah, blah. And, I was like, this is great stuff. And so I started recommending it, and I would listen to it over and over again. And I told myself, as I was listening to it, I realized how motivating it would like get me up in the morning. So I told myself I would listen to at least 2 episodes a day, morning or night. For me, it's funner listening to it when I'm like brushing my teeth and walking around like the
kind
apartment,
of in a meditative state. Yeah.
So I mean, I think like that's really what motivated me. And so then I started to learn that I need to ask myself bigger questions. Can I solve bigger world problems? I think I had also, actually a year ago, I came across this diagram called Ikigai, which is a Japanese philosophy for the purpose of life. And so this diagram displays like your passion, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, and what you're good at.
Yeah.
And so this, like, I think it's a Venn diagram of pretty much you can place yourself where you're at in your life on that Venn diagram. And it's funny because a year ago I was on one side, and then where I'm at right now, I feel like I'm getting closer to the middle. Like, and so it's just cool to think about. But anyways, so at work, I was, I guess, in this spot where I told myself I'm either going to stick in this particular position and either wait until they see how hard I've been working, or maybe I need to think about what is it that I want to do, and is that position available within my company? Because I do like my company.
Yeah.
I like what we stand for. And it would be a shame for me to leave when I feel like I could do more with that company. So I was on a project for like a sustainability software, and that was like one side of the technical side that I had experience with in my last position as an air quality modeler. So I really liked that project that I was on, but I was put on that project as an oil and gas subject matter expert.
Okay.
And I just realized like I didn't really want to be in just like the oil and gas big-headed knowledge person. Like I also wanted to get back into the technical side of things. For any like sustainability initiatives, regardless, whatever sector we're talking about, technology is the future.
Yep.
So I mean, what is it that the world needs? What is it that I'm passionate about? And then I'm in the process of getting really good at something. So I just kind of went behind my partner at my company, and I asked the different partner on the digital side. I was like, what kind of projects do you guys have going on? And he just straight up sat me down, and he was like, I want to know, what is it that you're passionate about? What is it that you want to do? And I told him right now, I want to solve really big problems for the world. And the way I see things is that, the project we were on with the sustainability software, that was a good sector. I think there's a lot of companies that could benefit with that, because understanding how some environmental compliance functions with government agencies, and as private industries have to comply with these government agencies, government agencies run extremely slow, and they're also often understaffed. And so there's so many loopholes and just a lot of things that
gaps in the industry.
There's a lot of gaps in the industry, and it's a struggle. There's a lot of things that slip
last episode
through those
2
holes.
episodes ago, working systems and finding gaps, right? That's entrepreneurship. Yeah. So before you go into that, so there's number one, appreciate you listening to the show and shouting out the show, and I'm thankful for you listening and then finding a way to apply it to help you go where you're going, which is, if I helped one person, then the show was worth it, right? But hopefully it's helping a lot more people. But the self-awareness part and the self-development and the personal development side, not a lot of people would latch onto that quickly. And so you're telling me you're in through your story, you're saying other people the people you surrounded yourself with are like pushing you kind of subconsciously in this direction.
Yeah.
Right. And I'll tell the audience that how I became aware of Katelyn was that she posted, you're selling yourself short. Stop being so humble. So she posted the mirror of her apartment, her condo, with just these drawings and writings all over. I couldn't
made
understand
like
it.
Diagrams,
quotes, wherever,
mapping.
and mapping, mental mapping, and tagged the podcast.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, okay, this is awesome. Go for it. Whatever. How did you hear about the podcast? And you referenced Myra, who works for me, connected you to the podcast, which it's not just getting motivated that gets you to where you want to go. You actually have to put in the work.
Yeah.
The mental work to plan, process.
Plan, process. I wrote that down on my mirror.
Yeah, and perform. Plan, process, and perform, right?
Yeah.
The 3 Ps. So, right? It takes a lot of that into it. So, so kudos to you for that. So now you've literally, what I'm hearing is you've manifested or actualized
I got
your role or your job.
I knew I
place,
had this
right?
like this fire in me, and so I knew I was listening to all these things, and I was like, okay, cool. Well, now I'm making moves because now this partner connected me with someone in Scotland for this new potential project that aligned perfectly with my goals. And it's just funny because I remember thinking it would be so cool to work with environmental initiatives like internationally.
Yeah.
But now this company has been recently acquired with my company. They want to break way to the U.S. region. And so I'm like, perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so as they're developing their face here, I get to also jump on and develop. So it's really a perfect opportunity for me.
To build.
Right, to build them up here as well. And I'm going to be working with some really amazing individuals that do have a lot of experience, and we're just going to be learning off of each other.
Yeah.
So it's a really cool opportunity for me to also not sell myself short in this moment, because with a new role comes a new job title, comes a new salary. So there's a lot of other opportunities.
New money, all that.
Exactly.
Right.
So that's kind of where I'm at right now, and that's really cool. But I knew I had this fire in me listening to these podcasts, and I knew I had to do something. And, I would listen to books and things like that. And I think I would like highlight them. And I'm like, I need something to write it down. But I honestly hate writing. And I don't like just having a Word document on your laptop. You think I'm going to look at that? I'm literally at a computer all day, every day, staring at these screens. Like, my eyes hurt.
Right.
And so I, in college, actually, how I made studying fun, I would use these really cool pens and glitter pens. I was known as having glitter pens.
Okay.
Turning in my papers and stuff.
Yeah, whatever works.
Highlights, get the pastel highlighters. Like, it works. Whatever makes you happy, right?
Yeah.
So I bought.
But there's a point to that, though, because it's not just reading and memorizing. You're getting your tactile senses in.
Yeah.
Right, and you're making it fun, so it's it's boosting your neurotransmitters for easy recall and comprehension. So whether you knew it or not, you've enhanced the way of learning by doing all these fun glitter markers and all these things, right?
So I bought a bunch of expo markers and also a sticky note booklet. So they have different size sticky notes. And I started quoting this podcast. Yeah. And then also things from books. And I only listen to 2 podcasts. It's this podcast and my other friend's podcast, because I haven't been a podcast person before. Yeah. And I just started slapping these sticky notes, as well as writing the quotes on my shower wall. Since it's marble, it has the appropriate surface for expo markers to stick on. Right. So I was like, this is the perfect shower thought.
And just write it down.
process.
Yeah.
Every time I'm in the shower, I reread everything. And I have this one particular thing. It's like, what's your 5-year goal? And then based off your 5-year goal, what is your 1-month goal? And then based off of your 1-month goal, what is your weekly goal?
Daily,
and like, what are things you can do at each goal? And so every 2 weeks I look at that, and then I write up a different map. So I'm planning it. Like, that's also helping me plan so I can process and then perform. And I think, for the most part, I think it's about 2 or 3 months coming now since this all really just started to
real quick
roll out.
Yeah, real quick.
That's
crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So it again, your story kind of validates everything I'm saying. I've mentioned the audience, and I, again, so thankful for that you listened and actually absorbed it and learned it and applied it, right?
Yeah.
But it seems throughout all of this and ladies and gentlemen in the audience, like, this is how fast it can happen.
Yeah.
And what happens is you listen to the podcast, you're writing things down, you're surrounding yourself with these reminders, you're absorbing the information, you're thinking about how it applies to your life. But ultimately, what I think, and debates on how the universe works, but ultimately, I think a couple episodes ago, I talked about raising your vibration to lock into the future that already exists.
Yeah.
But you got to slot yourself into that future. And by putting all this around you, inherently, subconsciously, your vibration is hitting that frequency where it's locking into where you're wanting or supposed to go.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm getting chills just kind of thinking about how, you're tapping into the universal flow of things. Right.
Yeah.
It's still early.
Yeah.
But it's there, right? And the second thing is, like, it's not your life story up to this point is not the quote entrepreneur's life where you're starting a company, you're hustling, you're fixing the copier, you're answering client calls, you're doing all these things. You're actually doing this within a framework of a company.
Yeah.
So like an intrapreneur, where you're applying entrepreneurship skills, talents, ideas in a corporate environment to elevate your status within the company.
Yeah.
Which is crazy awesome, which is crazy good.
Yeah. I think what was so useful for me is just the fact that this restructured my mindset. Again, if I hadn't stated before, I don't think I've really ever believed in myself in my life. I knew what qualities I came forward with, and I liked who I was, and there were moments where I could like boast about myself, like professionally and things like that. But right now, I'm able to believe in myself to actually look forward and say, if I can think about something, if I can draw up this idea in my head, then there's quotes that say, like, if you could draw up an idea, then there's ways, the universe will give you ways to get there. But now I'm at this point where I'm also able to identify, okay, how can I start asking myself the questions that are going to get there?
Yeah.
So it's asking yourself bigger questions. It's, like really believing in yourself. And because there was this quote that really hit me about a couple years ago. And my ex actually told me this. And it was, if you don't like where you're at and you're not changing it, then you don't care enough to change it.
Yeah. Nothing changes unless something changes.
Yeah.
Right?
And so it really hit me hard. But the one thing I was missing at the time was believing in myself.
Yeah.
So I had this.
You are what you believe you are, ultimately.
Yeah. Right? So I think it was really just like motivating myself and restructuring my mind, because something else that I've been falling back into is, one, that my purpose. And then two, I really had to scare myself into believing like I could actually lose this all and be on the streets.
Yeah. No options.
Right.
It's like no options.
I will die
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
I don't do this.
Yeah.
So when I started to tell when I first heard that, I started laughing.
Yeah.
And
I
then I
think,
started to tell myself, like, no, Katelyn, you're gonna die.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
if
no.
you don't do this,
you're
you know,
actually
like,
gonna die.
yeah. And then
Hey, you've gone past 23 though, so you're
Right.
doing okay.
And so I would tell myself that, and then I think, like, you know, if I don't do that, like, someone else will. So
It was kind of like your rock bottom when you're thinking about, oh my God, I could lose this all. So let me get off my ass and really go.
right, yeah. It was literally just like, I don't have any other option. Like, I could literally just drop everything that I am doing, let go of everything, and then watch myself fall into nothingness.
Yeah.
And losing everything that I worked for. Or I like to tell myself, be a shark.
Yeah.
I could be a shark about it, and go on the hunt tactfully.
Yeah.
So
that's breaking out of that humility a little bit,
yeah.
right? Sharks got to keep swimming or else they die, right?
Exactly, right.
So,
So like, yeah.
Okay.
Be a shark.
We're running short on time, so we have 2 segments. So I'll ask the final question. Have you found your grit?
I think I have, yeah.
Okay.
I'm
good.
going to continuously practice everything that I've been utilizing. Like, all these are tools for me.
Yeah.
So if I were to stop that, you know, if I were to erase everything, I actually had a dream about it, that I erased everything on my
Your mirror?
my mirror, and I was like, well, now I got to write something else. Like, I'm just going to continuously write this. Like, this is a practice that I'm going to instill in my life.
So literally you're writing your own story.
Right. Yeah.
Happens
I have
to be
the
on
pen.
your mirror.
Yeah. It's a glitter pen. It's a glitter pen.
So good. And then I'm starting a new thing, which is take a shot at the host. Is there any question within reason that you want to ask while you're a guest on the show? Hopefully I can answer it.
Yes.
Okay. Shot at the host, new segment.
The question that I had in mind was, if you saw your children struggling, or at least maybe they were doing something that you don't think was maybe the best of their ability, how would you be able to identify that with them so you can be that person that they need to help them map out their lives? And the reason why I asked that,
that's a pretty deep question.
right? Yeah. The reason why I asked that is because I'm in this like self-revelation period.
Yep. Good question.
Where I actually started babysitting too.
Okay.
I love kids now. Like,
Yeah.
before I'm not gonna lie, I was team F them kids.
Yeah.
And I've realized that they're just sponges. I like watching them figure out things. I like, especially with the natural world, it's very easy for them to introduce them to bugs and like plants and things like that, because it's very tangible items. It introduces like critical thinking and
it's fun
texture, and it's fun.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of tiny little science projects that are that can be involved with that. And so with that, I think I'm now realizing, like, all I want to do is like ensure that children don't grow up for so long as much as I did without like believing in myself. So if you were to see your children, you know.
Wow, that's a very that's a good question. That's a deep question. And by no means, before I answer, this is by no means parental advice. Like, you got to raise your own kids. For me, it's taken some time. I have my 14. God, started this podcast when he was 14. I have a 16-year-old son and a 5-year-old daughter. For me, nothing helps create critical thinking or build critical thinking than failure on their own. Right. So not leaving them abandoned to fail, but what I do is I consider it like the bumper rails on a bowling alley.
Yeah.
Right. So I start by giving them a wide berth. Like, the bowling alley is really wide and they can whatever they want to do. But when I see that they're not living to their potential or being able to do what they should be doing or could be doing, or they're out of bounds, then I narrow in that bowling alley. And it can sometimes be very narrow, like, hey, you're not doing X right, so let me let me create those boundaries for you so you can learn how to do it. And then once
Yeah.
they show proficiency, then I widen out the bumpers again. So it's again, not parental advice, but for me, it's your job as if you're babysitting or as a parent, is watching from afar, guiding, but you're guiding them by adjusting the width of the bowling alley lane, so that they learn for themselves. And when I'm teaching them, I really believe so hard in the Socratic method, where you teach by asking questions. See, you see, so if you tell them something, at this point, my 16-year-old, he's like, F you, dad, you're dad. Like, what do you know? Right? They got that kind of rebellious nature as teenagers. Whereas, let's say he didn't perform well at some task. I'll say, hey, you realize you did this, right? Yeah. Okay. Well, what happened? Why do you think that happened? And it's not a rhetorical question. It's like a question where I'm demanding an answer. Like, I already know in my mind.
Yeah.
So versus saying that happened because, it'll be, why do you think that happened?
Yeah.
So now they're developing that introspection. They're rewinding the tape in their mind. They're like, okay, this did happen this way. Maybe if I did it this way, you get a different result. So that's just me. I like that.
Yeah, no. From babysit, because, I felt like, okay, I'm 27 now. I'm going to have kids one day. So I'm like, I need to be comfortable with kids.
Yeah.
And that's something that I'm learning.
You have to let them fall.
Yeah.
You have to let them, like a lot of parents, they'll see them about to fall. And
asking questions. I think that's something that I'm learning that I didn't really have, is that I didn't really ask questions for myself. Like, how can I do something better? Or also, like, what do you want to be? That was as far as that conversation ever went.
Yeah.
And then how about asking, okay, why, not just why do you want to do that, but what are the things that you need to do in order to get there?
Yeah, exactly.
And then even though you have those barriers, is there a way around that barrier?
Yeah.
What are different avenues that other people have taken to get there?
It's all like
Does
you
everyone
stated
have
before.
the same path?
You stated before in the podcast, it's asking questions. You asked because you stated before, like, you started asking yourself the right questions. So when you're teaching these kids to ask questions,
right,
they learned the skills of asking
and you
themselves
don't know what
questions.
You don't know,
right?
So that I do think has to be taught.
Yeah, and it starts early. Like, even our 5-year-old daughter, like, she's a ball of energy, so she can get out of control sometimes. So it's not like, go sit down.
Yeah.
Be quiet. It's, Juniper, what are you in control or are you out of control?
Yeah.
And then she'll be like, well, I'm in control, but she's all over the place. And I said, okay, on a 1 to 10, how much control are you in?
Yeah.
And she'll be like 10. And I'll be like, well, I think you're at a 2, like out of control.
Yeah.
And then you can see her processing how to think about being in control. Now, obviously she gets out of control and starts beating up the dog, something like that. But it's just creating that, the pathway of thinking, even at a very good age. But that's a great question. That could be a whole subject of a podcast. But
next week,
next week, how to parent your kids for critical thinking.
To have
grit at an early age. Listen, it's been great having you on the show. Thank you so much for spending your time. So excited for your future. It's amazing. You're on the listen. At your age, if I'd known what you know, I can't even imagine how much more successful, if I even am successful, I don't think so, but how much more fulfilled I would be had I known what you already know at such a young age. And please do come back in a year, whatever the next big thing happens for you, where you're like, hey, it's the podcast or it's the self-improvement that brought me there. Would love to have you back on the show. Wish you all the most success in that next endeavor of that intrapreneurship career. Yeah. Helping the what is it? The Scotland company.
It was a company that was created in Scotland.
Scotland, okay. Yeah. And so excited for your pathway. Amazing. Thank you for watching the show. Thank you for sharing the show. Any last words? Any last words for the younger audience with respect to how they can achieve what they want to achieve and be fulfilled?
If you are stuck in an area of thinking, change your position, turn around and form up some different thoughts. That's all it takes.
That's fantastic. Fantastic advice. Thank you so much, Katelyn, for being here. Now, I don't know if you want to share your social or how people can contact you. If you want, okay. If you want to get in touch with Katelyn, how do they get a hold of you or how do they find you?
You can find me on Instagram at tenacious.v.
Tenacious.v for V for
Veverka.
Veverka. Thank you so much, Katelyn Veverka. Looking forward to exciting things from you. If you found something out of this show that you thought was special, found value, learned something, were entertained in any way, which I am almost guaranteed to say you were.
Yeah.
Please do share the show. If you're knowledgeable, share the show. That's how we grow. Thank you for tuning in. Looking forward to bringing you another episode. Thank you, Katelyn, once again. I know Myra already gave you one, but now you get two. We always give a guest N2N Podcast hat, so feel free to pass that along or have an extra one.
Thank you.
But Katelyn Veverka.
Or Veverka.
Veverka. Okay, there you go. Now it's easy to remember. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Hope you had a great time, and we'll see you next time.